And welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of the Top Podcast. I'm your host, Harris Reno. That is my co-host, Dan Kiley. Dan, how are you doing today on this Friday evening? It's a little weird saying Friday because I'm used to saying Tuesday.
Hey, it's Friday. My work week is done, and I don't have to go back to work till July 11th because I'm going on
Ooh.
vacation. So I am jacked. Everybody else has got a chance to take their vacations. Jeremiah, Jonathan, you, everybody except for me, it is my turn.
That is right. Dan's going on vacation. I don't know where he's going. I haven't talked to him yet. I don't know if he is going anywhere, but we wanted to wish y'all all a happy 4th of July. I hope y'all get to enjoy some time with your family, including Dan. I also will be heading on a little trip, going down to the beach for a little bit at some point. In the next 2 days, so that'll be fun. But we will be back here, just a little house cleaning. We will be back next Friday. Yes, 2 back-to-back Friday episodes in a row. I still got to talk with Dan about what time we want to do. But next Friday, make sure you'll tune in to next Friday evening for episode 48 of the Top podcast. But with that, we have a lot to cover, Dan, because the last time we did a show was about, I guess, 10 days ago? Because, I mean, this isn't our usual Tuesday show. And right after our last episode, the episode 46, the Top podcast, Arch Manning, the enigma, the biggest recruit of all time, as I've heard. Probably, to be safe, I say the biggest recruitment of the last decade, because it goes back pretty far. But decided to go out with his announcement and committed to the University of Texas, much to our surprise. We hosted Brooks last week, and, I think all three of us were on the same page that we weren't buying the Texas hype. Georgia was treating it as just another recruitment. And, Texas had all the noise going on over there, and we were buying it. And then he did. So, Dan, I want to get your thoughts. I mean, what did you think when Arch Manning announced? And I wanted to get your thoughts on, was a tweet your expectation for how he's going to announce it?
Well, I was shocked because, I mean, like you said, going back to our show, the last show that we did, we had Brooks on, and, you know, to loosely quote Brooks in his interpretation of Texas is, you're doing too much, bro. It's like Texas was just out there. It just really kind of caught me off guard because I really thought Georgia was in a good spot. I thought what Texas had going on with the lack of what they had going on, the questions around the stability of the program. I thought Georgia was in a great spot. It seemed like he really enjoyed himself every single time he was here. I just felt very comfortable with it, and I thought Georgia was in a really good spot. And then all that smoke started coming out that Texas was like way ahead and all this other stuff, and that he was going to go there. And, it's kind of like, prior to an NFL draft or something like that, teams kind of say stuff all the time, and you're like, you don't believe anything that they're saying. So to the short answer is I was caught a little bit off guard. I didn't expect him to go there. But then when you hear, and the crazy thing is all these people are like, I'm hearing. You're not hearing anything because he wasn't talking to anybody. But when he finally did talk, and what he finally said was that he wanted to go to a program like Texas, who is not winning right now, because if he goes in there and he wins a national championship, he's the guy that did it. And I guess in a way, you got to be able to respect that. And then it kind of fits. And I sent out a tweet right afterwards that it kind of fits the Manning profile. Peyton was one of the highest recruits ever, and he could have went anywhere he wanted to. And he went to Tennessee. And I'm not saying Tennessee was like a doormat program. They weren't, but they were not a dominant program. They were not the team of the day, so to speak, where they were the hot commodity. And he chose to go somewhere else where he had to work for it, and anything that he got out of it. And to be fair, Tennessee won the national championship with T. Martin at quarterback, but they won it because of Peyton, because of everybody coming into the program because of him. So, a lot of that credit goes to Peyton. And then if you look at Eli was one of the highest recruited quarterbacks of all time. He could have went anywhere he wanted to. And, all the big programs, Alabama, everybody, the USC, everybody wanted Eli. And he chose to go to Ole Miss because that's where his dad went to school. And kind of the same mentality where he wanted to be the guy to bring them out of the dweller, I can't think of the word I'm looking for, the cellar, so to speak, and rise them to prominence. He wanted to be that guy. Now, he didn't necessarily do that at Ole Miss, and they were slightly competitive, but they didn't really win anything of note. But at the end of the day, Peyton went number 1 overall. Eli went number 1 overall. Whether Arch wins a national championship at Texas or not, or hell, if he even stays at Texas all 4 years, who knows? But Arch will probably be the number 1 quarterback too. But then, I'll let you react to that. But then I have a follow up. So you go ahead and react to what happened, and then I got a follow up.
Everything you just said is kind of the same thing that I was thinking at the same time. I thought it was a really clever tweet because I didn't put all the pieces together like you did, talking about how they've never gone to a national championship contender, or at that point in time, none of the Mannings did. I don't know about Archie. I don't know what Ole Miss was looking like back in Archie's days. Dan wasn't even alive. I sure as heck wasn't even alive. So I don't know what Ole Miss was looking at. I don't even care to go on Wikipedia and try and look it up. But really, it got me wondering, trying to go back and look at Georgia's staff and look at the potential inroads that Georgia had to the Manning family. The one that I could find that was a direct connection to them was between Matt Luke and Eli Manning. Matt Luke was the starting center, or I don't know if he played center. I think he played. I thought he played center. I think he played center, if my memory holds correct. And he ended up graduating a year before Eli Manning went to Ole Miss. But Matt Luke stuck around as a GA for 1 year and was there when Eli was there. So that was the big connection on Georgia's staff, if I'm not wrong. Personal connection between Georgia staff and the Manning family. And obviously, Matt Luke stepped down after winning a national championship with Georgia to go be a dad and enjoy that aspect of life, because you can't blame him. He has kids that are middle school and wants to see him grow up, but also the game's changing. The coaching world is very different. We're going to get into a little bit of that in a little bit, but it got me wondering, how much did Matt Luke step down, his stepping down, his resignation, his leaving the staff affect Georgia? Obviously that's a familiar face for Arch, but if it was all along about, going somewhere where he's, going to be able to make his own legacy, be able to, be the savior of Texas, then I don't know if Georgia really had a shot with him. There was a video that surfaced not long after he committed of him wearing a Texas shirt when he was a little kid, saying he wants to go to Texas.
And if that's where he was at, and if that's what he wanted to do, then God bless him, right? At the end of the day, every one of these kids has to make the decision what's best for them, what's best for their long-term future. And I always come back to, like, when I talk to younger guys and they're talking about, I want to go here, there, and the other, I always ask them, is that someplace you'd want to live the rest of your life? Because if you go to University of Georgia and you graduate from there and you're a player there, and if you plan on living the rest of your life here in Georgia, that makes a lot of sense, right? Because if you're a superstar player here in Georgia, you've been here long enough to know the way that people react to you. It's going to be easier to get jobs. You're more open in the community. But like, let's say you want to go to, I don't know, you want to go to Tennessee, right? What is that where you want to? Do you want to spend the rest of your life in Knoxville? Maybe you do, and if you do, good for you. But like Jacksonville, do you want to, or University of Georgia down in Gainesville, do you want to spend the rest of your life down in Gainesville? I don't. That's not anywhere I'd want to be. Would you want to spend the rest of your life in Tuscaloosa? Hell no, not a chance in hell that I would want to do that. But Austin, Texas is an absolutely beautiful town. They always say keep Austin weird, and they've got like a crazy homeless thing going on. But I had a chance to go out there a couple of years ago and really kind of take it all in. It's a really cool town. And, if you'd want to hang around Austin or any part of Texas, if you're a Texas Longhorn and you live in Texas, I'm sure they treat you pretty much the same way. But moving on to what my follow-up was, is, he goes and I, for the longest time, I had the question, how good is he? Like, he's one of 4 perfect ranked quarterbacks in the history of the college rankings. You had Vince Young, you had it written down. Vince Young, Trevor Lawrence, and Quinn Ewers. 3 of the 4 perfect ranked quarterbacks have ended up at Texas, which is crazy, right? It doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but he wanted to play for Sarkisian. I get it. But, I started having the questions and I was putting it out there and it kind of fell on deaf ears. And then the people who did respond were like, you're an idiot, which, fair. Maybe I am an idiot, but how good is he? And then I started to see some quarterback evaluators come out publicly now talking about he's not camping. And we talked about this with Brooks last week. He's not camping. And Brooks like, well, he doesn't have to. And I get it. But, now there's a lot of people starting to question, why is he not competing? Why did he not do the Elite 11? All the other great quarterbacks have done the Elite 11. Why not him? Right? I mean, Brock Vandagriff, I don't think he did, but he didn't camp very much. I don't know if Gunnar did or not. I'm not 100% sure. But, if this kid is supposed to be the best quarterback prospect in America and, the best that we've seen in such a long time, and he's competing against, to quote the article that I wrote, slow white kids in private school in Louisiana, who those guys can't compete with him at all. I mean, it's ridiculous how bad they are. Don't you think that he would want to expose himself to other elite talents and kind of judge where he's at? And he's not been willing to do that. He didn't do the Elite 11. He's not doing any of these camps. And a lot of the Elite 11 judges, and, maybe part of it is sour grapes and they're trying to call him. I don't know what, maybe, there might be some motivation for the comments, but don't forget to like the video. Yes, please like our video. But a lot of the comments that are coming out, from these Elite 11 coaches and stuff is they're really disappointed that he didn't want to compete. And they're starting to ask the question why he's not willing to compete. Why would he not want to stack himself up? And then, there's some whispers that well, if he were to compete side by side with these other guys, he's going to get embarrassed. Now we're going to find out because he's going to go to University of Texas and he's either every last bit of what they claim he is or he's not. And, part of me, very small part, but part of me is kind of like, damn, I'm kind of glad he didn't come to Georgia now because it's going to be a circus anyway. And then imagine that 1% chance, just that 1% chance that he really is a fraud and he does it on Georgia's watch. Well, then what our rivals are going to say.
You know what the fan base is going to say.
Huh?
You know what the fan base is going to say.
Oh, yeah. He was the can't miss greatest quarterback ever and Georgia ruined him. So part of me is like, we don't need that. So I just have I have a lot more questions about him here more recently than I did in the past. And it's not sour grapes for me that he didn't come here because I'm on record saying that I wanted him here at Georgia. But then again, these kids, they just got to make the right decision. So I don't know. I'm so conflicted on this Arch thing. It would have been so cool to have him here. But then again, part of me is just like, I'm so glad we don't have to deal with that circus now.
Well, Jonathan and Jeremiah, I forget which one of you, so let me know in the comments. Jonathan, you said you making a comment was your appearance. I don't know if you're still with us. I don't know if you're on your cruise yet or if you're somewhere over the ocean. I'm sure me and Dan would I speak for both of us when I say we'd love to join you on that cruise. But, they pointed out in their show, the Classic City Sports Podcast, the one thing that we're avoiding now with Archie going to Texas is, what if he doesn't start as a true freshman? You don't have to avoid, we don't have to deal with the onslaught of, quarterback A is playing terrible, put in Arch Manning. Kirby Smart can't, playing his favorites, put in Arch Manning. Basically what we went through with Justin Fields. And you don't have to deal with that again because, we knew it was going to happen. If Arch didn't start as a true freshman, it was going to happen because, Carson Beck or Brock Vandagriff, whoever the starting quarterback is in 2023, they make one bad play, everyone's at Kirby Smart's throat saying put in the true freshman. So I'm glad we don't have to deal with that. But now I want to take this into kind of a different direction, into more about what does it mean, not only for Georgia, but also for Texas, because it kind of, the answer is out in the open. If you've been paying attention to, what's been going on in the world of college football, even deep down in the weeds of all things, and you've been keeping your ear close to the ground, you would know that Texas has 10 commits since Arch Manning committed last week, which is ridiculous. It's 8 days, Dan, after Arch Manning committed, and they have 10 commits. It is, I don't know if I've seen a run like this. I can't remember something like this where they get 10 commits in a week. And it's not like they're just pulling scrubs or the quote unquote scrubs. Yeah, they got a few 3-stars in there, but they have 2 5-star rated prospects, 2 4-stars and 4 3-stars. So they're not just pulling, Joe Blows out of Michigan. They're actually getting guys. They're getting guys on their board And it's showing you what having a Manning, not on the roster yet, but what having a Manning at your disposal can do for you. Because Texas, I mean, remove NIL, remove Arch from the situation, they probably go back to what, being a top 5, top 10, recruiter, even with Sarkisian at the wheel. They've never they haven't been this elite recruiting machine over the last 5 to 10 years. But now with Sarkisian in place and Arch Manning on board, you're going to get the elite players. You're going to start recruiting with the Alabamas and the Ohio States and Georgias of the world. You're going to start winning more of those battles, and we're already seeing it. I mean, they already won with Arch. There are whispers going around that they're about to win another recruiting battle. You can go look on the internet for that one. They're competing now, even after a 5-7 season, and I can tell, Georgia fans, yeah, they're upset. Not really upset. They're upset that they're losing. They think they're losing more recruiting battles than they're used to. When in reality, it's still June. But Dan, I mean, what impact does this have on Georgia going forward in recruiting?
Well, I think one of the biggest impacts would be look at the players that Texas got. I mean, one of the commitments they got was the number 1 receiver in the country.
Close to it.
Yeah, 5-star kid. Well, the amount of people that committed right after he committed, they were waiting to see where he was going. So they must have it on pretty good authority through him that he's not going to flip. So I saw immediately after the commitment, everyone's like, haha, left Kirby too much time. He's going to flip him. All of Kirby's quarterbacks are flips. And I get it. And I agree. Kirby has done a fantastic job of flipping guys. I mean, George Pickens was the last day, right? I mean, signing day is when he pulled that flip off. And
Jermaine Burton was last minute.
Yeah. I mean, he's been able to do it. But a lot of these, and of course, there's exceptions to every rule. So I'm sure that somebody could pop in 2 seconds and say, haha, I remember this guy did. But for the most part, these elite quarterbacks that you create an entire class around, once they make their commitment, that's where they are, because now their next job is to go ahead and get everybody to go play there. Like Justin Fields, once he committed to Georgia, he went on a run and got a bunch of guys to come play with him. And you said you can't remember somebody committing so quickly or whatever, but when Justin Fields committed to Georgia, there was a slew of guys that committed right after. Same with Jacob Eason too. Once Jacob Eason confirmed he was coming, he wasn't going to flip, a bunch of guys came to come play with him. And they're both partly responsible for some of the receivers that we've had come through. The success we've had recruiting wide receivers is because they wanted to play with those quarterbacks. Now, who knows what that's going to mean for Texas? They got a bunch of commitments, like you said. 4 of them were offensive linemen. I'm sure that Arch has a Rolodex of guys that he wants to protect his ass, because you know what, you can look really good if you're in the pocket, nobody can touch you. So he's probably calling every offensive lineman in the country that's worth a crap, going, hey, would you come to Texas with me? Just stand there, just don't let anybody touch me. Receivers are going to fly to him, but again, and I saw somebody put this out there, and I can't remember who it was. Maybe it was one of our guys, I'm not sure. Somebody put it, well, that's great that you got Arch Manning and you're getting some receivers and stuff, but your defense sucks. And that's fair. I mean, we've seen Oklahoma do that, right? In Ohio State. Well, Ohio State's actually pretty good all the way around, but like
they're average. They're above average.
Yeah, well, we've seen a lot of these teams. They've built these great offenses, but their defense can't stop anybody. So, I mean, Georgia wins the national championship on the back of one of the greatest defenses in the history of college football. I mean, they know how important defense is. I think Sarkisian knows how important defense is, but I just don't know that they can pull the defenders that they need to. Like Georgia's on the verge of putting one of the best defensive classes in the history of recruiting together in this class. And Georgia's offense, we've talked about, they have a chance to be really, really good with or without Arch Manning. I mean, with the guys that we have here, we have a chance to be plenty good. But our defense is going to be amazing year in and year out. It just is. We're not going to stop recruiting defensive players. So our team is going to have a chance to be successful, whether we have the greatest quarterback ever or not. But Texas, they can have the greatest quarterback, but they're going to win games 65-64. I mean, how are they planning on winning these football games? So, based on what we know at this moment, Arch makes them better. Hell yes, he makes them better. He's going to make their class better. But if they don't recruit defenses and start playing defense over there, he's going to be you're going to win 7 to 8 games if you're one of those teams anyway, because half your roster, or not roster, but your schedule is terrible, right? Until they get into the SEC, which is 2025. And that's going to lead us into our next topic. But, I'll let you finish this topic off.
And they did land one of those 5 stars was a 5-star safety. I think it was the day after. So that's something we got to see. Yes, he's going to pull all these, elite offensive talents with him. And Georgia, it sucks because, obviously you want all the talent you can get offensively because, Georgia's starting to pick up, at least recently, starting to find all these hidden gems on their offense and they're developing them. Just look at the receiver room. But you also want the 5-star, the no doubts, kind of like George Pickens. You want that fanfare that comes with a 5-star wide receiver. So Arch would help you get that, and he's certainly helping Texas with that. But like Dan said, Darren has a point. Yes, their offense is going to be great. Their offense is going to be a top 5, top 10 unit this year, and probably the next year. They already got some weapons on their roster that have made a name for themselves so far. Bijan Robinson, Xavier Worthy, they got options, no doubt. They also pulled in a few transfers. They got some Bama transfers, Dan. Getting off Daddy Saban up there in Tuscaloosa. But, like Dan says, you're going to have to get a defense. You don't need an elite defense. You don't need a historical defense to win a national championship. They just got to be good. They got to be, above average. I think LSU's 2018 defense was a little underrated. Yeah, their pass rush wasn't as good as people would have expected from a championship team. Definitely wasn't near the heights of Georgia's defensive line or pass rush, but their corners were stacked. I mean, you had Derek Stingley back there, and I'm blanking on the name they had lined up across of them. They had safety plays, I think plays for the Browns now. I'm blanking on all these names. Caleb Chason was an edge rusher. They were stacked, and I think they were a little underrated. Bama's defense this past year was pretty good. Not the best they've had, but you can win with an above average to average defense. So I'm looking forward to seeing what happens. But Dan, real quick, before we move on from this segment, Georgia has big decisions on their hands. Brooks Austin covered it well over at SI Dogs Daily. What exactly is going on? What exactly Georgia has to do, or what their decisions are. You can go find it over at dogsdaily.com. Dan, they got two options, and I would like to hear your opinion on what you would like to see. Option A is, you just move on from this 2023 class entirely at the quarterback position and start focusing guys, for next year's class, 2024's class, and beyond, which features a name like Dylan Raiola, who many believe is, maybe the better prospect when compared to Arch Manning. He certainly faced some top class competition out there in Arizona. His dad, Dominic Raiola, played with, was the starting center with Matthew Stafford, former Bulldog, and that was kind of a connection there. Maybe if Georgia didn't go after Arch Manning, maybe you have Raiola in this class. I don't know, but and then you look at Julian Sain, who has picked up a lot of buzz over the last few days. I've seen his name in plenty of articles talking about him in Georgia. It's going to be interesting to see if you can get him. And then you have DJ Lagway, who's another 5-star prospect. So that is your options. If you move on from this 2023 class of quarterbacks, you got a lot of talent to look forward to in the years beyond. Then you get into option B, which is try and get back in on one of the quarterbacks in the class. There are some names that Georgia's been linked with. Dan, you brought up one last week talking about Marcel Reed, a current Ole Miss commit. I think that was one of the ones you brought up. I don't know if Georgia can get back into that one or flip them away from Lane Kiffin. It's going to be tough because, what quarterback wouldn't want to play in that system? And then you got Dylan Lonergan, who, I haven't heard much buzz about with Georgia in a long time. So, we'll see. But Dan, what do you prefer? Are you wanting to move on and go find the next best option, the best option in 2024? Or would you like to see if, you can snag one and take a quarterback basically every year like they have over the last few years?
So my initial thought was that they would just wait to 2024, like Brooks said last week, that they would just punt it all together. But then I sent you actually, I didn't send it to you, but the day after the Arch thing, On3 had an article talking about Georgia's latest school to enter the recruitment of 4-star Baylor commit Austin Novosad. So big, strong arm guy, athletic, can make plays with his legs. Don't know a whole lot about him other than what I read, but apparently he's a real deal, real good player. He was in the Elite 11 competition. I don't know how he did or whatever. But, if they're going to – that's a name I didn't know. But then again, like, it's something that Brooks said a long time ago, is that Georgia's in on a lot of these guys. You don't hear their names, and they're not, they don't put anything out there for your consumption. So if they've got a relationship with this guy, enough, so much of a relationship to where they got him on campus within a day. They made a phone call, got him on campus. I haven't heard Brooks or anybody else cover this. I don't know how On 3 got it and nobody else got it, but Austin Novosad, I don't know him. If you want to look him up, feel free. But they wrote a pretty nice article about him and talked about they got a real shot to try to flip him from Baylor. Because, if you're looking at that kid, you're like, hey, Baylor or Georgia, Baylor or Georgia. I think I'm going to go to Georgia. But, maybe he doesn't want to come in with such a loaded room. But I think at the end of the day, maybe they get somebody like that. But if not, I think 2024 is where they're going to have to get back in on it big time. There's so much time before that class is ready to go. I don't care where anybody's committed to. I think the Raiola kid, we have a really good chance. I mean, Stafford has got a great relationship with the family. He's already told the guy that he could use his house while he's living here. I mean, come on. I think we got a good shot with a kid like that. So I don't know which way they're going to go. I'm sure that they're going to kick the tires on some of these quarterbacks. Maybe, you're probably out at this point on any 5-star for this class, but you get a high 4-star. I mean, like I said, I don't know this Austin Novosad kid from anybody, but just a highlight clip that they had tagged in the video. Okay. I mean, I'll take him. I mean, a kid can play, but I feel like the biggest winner out of all this is Gunnar Stockton, because I was thinking to myself, that kid is never going to step foot on the field. And I feel bad for him because he's a good quarterback. He's from here. His dream was to play at Georgia. But we said the same thing about Stetson Bennett. So who's to say that Gunnar doesn't get the shot and win it? And the other quarterbacks are, I mean, he's not the biggest guy in the world. And that was some of our concern with Gunnar, is he's not big, but Georgia's shown that does not matter to them at all. So and Gunnar can freaking rip it. I thought Brock was ready-made to be a quarterback here at Georgia. But what? It's funny when you listen to the talk. You hear a lot about Carson Beck, and then you don't hear anything about Brock or Gunnar. They don't ever. I mean, and maybe that's by design. They don't want to inflate their head in any type of way or whatever. I don't know what the case is, but and maybe I'm wrong. Maybe you guys do hear a lot about them, but for the life of me, I don't ever see anything on Brock or Gunnar.
And Gunnar, I think a lot of people forget Gunnar broke the records of, I think holds multiple state records in Georgia, that were once held by Deshaun Watson and Trevor Lawrence. So this is no, scrub that Georgia's picked up. This is an actual dude. Did a lot through his high school career, one of the most decorated quarterbacks, in the state, coming out of the state of Georgia in a long time. Breaking the records of Deshaun Watson and Trevor Lawrence, that's no easy task, no matter what those records are. So I'm excited to see where he goes. And going back to your point about Austin Novosad and Georgia pursuing him, over at the SI Buckeye site, I forget, I'm blanking on the name of their site, so I'm sorry. But they were covering that Ohio State's also in on him and could be pursuing a flip from Baylor. So that is some, high-level competition there with Georgia. Georgia is trying to pick up on a 2023 quarterback, but it does make you feel better when talking about, the evaluations of these quarterbacks if Ohio State's in on someone that Georgia also wants. So that's going to wrap up kind of our Arch Manning, the Texas segment of today. We want to touch on it, but didn't want to spend too much time on it because, the fan base, from the most part, from what I've seen, for the most part, wants to move on. And they already have moved on in some cases. We're back on the regular beat over here, at SI Dogs Daily. We're covering, day to day, whatever goes on, with the University of Georgia. And now we got to talk about, what's coming next in college football, Dan, because it's been NIL for a while. We talked about it. That was, the big headline throughout most of this offseason. And now we're going, in a direction that I necessarily don't like. And it's the college football super conferences. Dan, this broke yesterday afternoon, and it all started. This is the second biggest domino to fall in the realignment of conferences in college football. Both Pac-12 powerhouses historically, USC and UCLA, will be joining the Big Ten Conference no later than 2024. Like I just said, the two biggest names in the Pac-12. Any money, most of the money that the Pac-12 makes now and it's probably the least lucrative, TV deal out of all the Power Five conferences, just because they're at a disadvantage when it comes to the East Coast viewers playing, late at night on the East Coast. It's because of the name value of USC and UCLA. Now they're going to the Big Ten, and it's going to cause a stir because right now, we saw what happened last summer when Texas and OU decided they wanted to join the SEC, and that's still to come. That's official. They are joining by at least 2025. It could happen earlier, especially because the Big 12 went out and got Cincinnati, Houston, and Central Florida to join, and those teams will be joining the Big 12 next offseason. So, is Texas going to stick around in an expanded Big 12 for another 2 years, 3 years, or are they going to get out of their contract early and come join the SEC and really start giving everyone a new, a look at what the new college football will look like? And Dan, I just want to touch on this real quick before I hand it over to you. Everyone, I think for the most part, everyone was excited about, this realignment in college football. And yes, on face value, super conferences mean more money for schools, which is why they're probably, all down for it. Even though it's more competition at the end of the day, hey, it's more money. And money means more, than anything to these programs. So, but, it doesn't mean a better product. And I say yes, because every given Saturday, you're going to have, multiple, potentially multiple really good matchups, whether it's USC, Ohio State, and then Georgia, Auburn on the same weekend. Like, you don't get that very often. Yeah, you got some stacked weekends here and there. So yes, it means a better product, but it doesn't mean that for the majority of the sport. You're going to leave multiple schools and conferences out because, first off, if everything that's being reported, ends up coming true and Notre Dame joins the Big Ten, and then, Miami, Clemson, and Florida State, the three biggest name brands left in the ACC, join the SEC, you're putting the ACC and the Pac-12, at risk of going extinct. They're already basically on life support because, the SEC and the Big Ten are coming to poach some of their teams. Notre Dame basically is an ACC team. They competed in the ACC the other year when 2020 happened and COVID hit. They competed for the ACC title, and they beat Clemson in the regular season. But what is North Carolina State, Wake Forest, Georgia Tech going to do when Miami, Clemson, and Florida State leave the SEC? Because if the SEC wants them, they're going to get them. Because who would turn down those lucrative contracts? Who's going to turn down, almost a $30 million I saw estimated increase in revenue for each school if you add those three teams into the SEC? But yes, you get your two super conferences. You get the SEC and the Big Ten. But what you're doing is all the work that the NCAA has said and all these people have said who supported it, the quote-unquote work to level the playing field is being undone. What is the point of NIL other than to help players, make their money, but also everyone who defends NIL and basically just paying players in front of our eyes, coming out of high school, something Dan's going to touch on later in the show, how's that leveling the playing field? Because, the SEC and the Big Ten, all the schools in there are going to be able to offer you much more money legally, too, because they're going to have, over $30 million increase in revenue. That's just for, I think that was for both conferences, but that may just be for the SEC. So you're putting college football on a tier system, and I don't like it. And Dan, I'm curious to see how you feel about these tiers because I've listed them out on the sheet. It's the big two conferences with the SEC and the Big Ten. You're going to have the middle three conferences with the ACC, the Big 12, and the Pac-12. And then you're going to have your group of five conferences basically in the third tier of all this. Now, this is how the tiers are going to be put together, as long as a third super conference does not get created. We don't know what's going to happen. We don't know if the Big 12 is going to go get Oregon and Washington. I don't know if I would put them I would call that a super conference. It would definitely be a step up from where they are now. But, if the SEC and the Big Ten are, the top two in the sport, who's going to want to go play anything below them?
Well, that's a lot to unpack and all that stuff that you just said. But I'll start here. With USC and UCLA. Last year, the Pac-10 paid out $19.8 million per school from the conference. The SEC paid out $70 million per school. You don't have to be any type of math wizard, or you don't have to be smart even to figure out there's a huge inequity there. So why would you want to stay in the – and then the Conference of Champions, the Pac-12. Well, USC and UCLA have 225 of your 337 national championships.
That is a stat.
225 of your 337 have just left your conference. Now, granted, Stanford has 123 national championships on their own, and they are number one in the nation with the most national titles of all time. And that's all sports. In the South, we don't give a shit about all those other sports. We only care about football for the most part. But, I mean, think about it. So the Conference of Champions have 337 national championships right now. The next closest is like 225, and I think it's the Big Ten. And then the SEC is like right behind that, like 214 or something like that. I had it and I can't find it because they had a breakdown of every single conference. So that they had, and then but once you move Texas and Oklahoma into the Big Ten, into the SEC, and you move the two UCLA and USC into the Big Ten. The Big Ten is now the Conference of Champions, and the SEC is right behind them by like 3 or 4. So we can catch them in a year or two. But yeah, it's a really big deal that they're moving out, and then that leaves the Pac-12 on life support. They don't have anything, right? And then the Big 12, they don't have anything either because they're the two flagship franchises from that conference are joining the SEC. Now, I've heard so much stuff in the last couple of days about who's going to go where, right? And, like, oh, this would be my dream scenario. Georgia Tech going to the Big Ten makes a lot of damn sense. It didn't to a lot of people, but hear me out. The Big Ten is trying to do what the SEC did and try to get into these markets, right? Why did we bring Texas and Oklahoma in? Is because we wanted that market. Why did we bring Missouri? It's growing that footprint, right? Well, where does the Big Ten not have any teams is down here. They want to be able to recruit from the South, right? So if you can get a team like Georgia Tech to, it just makes it easier. And Ohio State has never had a problem coming into Georgia getting players. They get who they want for the most part. But imagine like some of the kids that don't go there is like, my parents will never get to see me play. They're not going to be able to come. Well, Georgia Tech's on our schedule because they're in our conference. I mean, and it gets more exposure for the Big Ten just being in this market. So Georgia Tech going to the Big Ten, I would look for that to actually happen. I think that's real, even though Georgia Tech is not like a prize, so to speak. It's not the school they want. It's the location that they want. And that makes a lot of sense. And you and I were kind of going back and forth via text about, there were stipulations in the agreements with the SEC where we wouldn't go after Clemson to protect South Carolina. We wouldn't go after any more Florida schools to protect Florida. Well, with the way that everything is changing, and Ben Reno, is that your brother, I'm guessing?
Affirmative.
Saying that Georgia Tech would meet the academic requirements. Absolutely, they would. And that is a great point to point out. A terrific point to point out because
that blow that academic standard in the water, just out of the water.
Well, no, the Michigan, like their academic requirements are ridiculous. They're kind of like Duke, where they don't really lower their academic requirements for athletes. So it makes sense. It all fits. But bringing into the SEC, you talk about Clemson. That makes a hell of a lot of sense, and that's something that I've been talking about forever. I would love to see Clemson in the SEC. I think that's where they belong. They fit. Up until last year, they were built like an SEC team, right? And I think it's hard to argue that Clemson's not built like an SEC team, but FSU has just been so terrible. Like, do we really want them? I mean, I guess you have to take them, right? And in Miami, I get it, why you would want Miami. But again, they're kind of like living on the past, right? Like FSU and Miami were so special in the 90s and early 2000s, but they haven't really done anything since then. So it's like bringing them in, is it more of a benefit to us or to them? And I think at this moment, it would be more of a benefit to them. But I would be surprised if there is a random team somewhere that jumps up into the SEC or jumps into the Big Ten that you just didn't see coming. And then I guess What they're going to have to do with these other conferences is just try to piece it together. You're not going to have a Big 12 or a Pac 12. You just might have big. Or just, I don't know. You're going to have teams all over the damn place. But one of the unintended consequences of all this, before I'll let you get back to it, is this is fine for football. For the most part, it's okay for basketball. But for baseball and these non-revenue sports, baseball doesn't make money at any of these sports. I mean, hell, Ole Miss just won the national championship in baseball. I guaranteed if you looked at their books, they lost money on the year. So all of these non-revenue sports. So now what you're telling me is you're going to have a girls' golf match for UCLA. They have to travel to Rutgers. How in the hell is that going to work? I mean, like,
I mean, they're already going to Omaha for the College World Series, so
yeah, it's in the middle of the country. Everybody can meet in the middle. You're talking about you have the farthest you can go on the West Coast. I can't view it with my hands, but you're going to go all the way from the bottom left all the way up to the far upper right of the United States of America for a conference game.
It would be like Georgia going to the Rose Bowl every year. Once a week. Once every year, going to the Rose Bowl to play in that venue. That would be insane. I mean,
so you want to hear something funny? So some smartass on Twitter was talking about, just your run-of-the-mill 56-hour car ride for a conference game. That's hilarious. He put up on the his Waze or whatever. he took a screenshot. 56 hours.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, as fun as it would be to see USC go to Ohio State, in the Horseshoe for just a huge game. Are they gonna have to relocate the conference championship games? I mean, because you think of that, that's in Indianapolis at the Big Ten. SEC has it, easier because Oklahoma and Texas. That's not that far away. The time difference is not really a factor at all. They can go to Atlanta and be all right. It's just a plane ride. For Georgia, they just hop on a bus and it's about 90 minutes, and you're in Atlanta. So, but with the Big Ten, you're telling me you're gonna fly on a plane all the way to Indianapolis, basically once a year because I'm assuming if USC is as good as everyone thinks they're gonna be in the Big Ten championship. I don't know where they're going to be in 2023. We're going to find out if you can just build a culture off of transfer portals because that's basically what Lincoln Riley's banking on. He's banking on he can get 9-10 wins just pulling kids out of the portal, getting basically ready-made products to win right now. It would effectively it would be like the Rams, trading all their draft picks and just going into free agency. That's what they've done. Just screw draft picks, go into free agency and go get ready-made products. So we're going to find out with that. But Dan, we're 40 minutes in, and we have not had Dan's new rants of the week. I made a request to make an alteration to an addition of sorts to this. So Dan, I'm going to let you take it away.
All right. So what we're going to talk about today is my rant. So what I'm mad about is we have, because of NIL now and how out of control it kind of got so fast, you have high school seniors or rising high school seniors that have been guaranteed this NIL money now in the millions. And I need you to think about this for just a second. Because of NIL, we now have high school kids making more money, having never played one snap of college football. We have them making more money than a starting NFL quarterback who won a Heisman Trophy. Do I need to say that again? We have high school kids who hadn't done a thing making more money than a Heisman Trophy winning quarterback who's starting in the NFL. Marcus Mariota making $2.2 million this year. And we have high school kids making more money than him. That is absolutely ridiculous. There has to be something that we can do to put and I know it's a free market, right? You can make whatever you want to, but just how ridiculous is that? You have a guy who is a starting NFL quarterback who won a Heisman Trophy, which is the pinnacle of the college cycle. If you win the Heisman Trophy, you are the best player in college football. And that guy's making less money than a kid who's never thrown a college pass in his life. To me, there's just something fundamentally wrong with that. And you can call me a hater all you want to, and you can say whatever you want to about me personally, about the way I feel about it. But that is absolutely freaking ridiculous that a high school kid should be making as much money as an NFL starter, regardless if you won a Heisman Trophy or not. That's irrelevant. And, for the most part, the NFL quarterbacks are doing just fine. But just the fact that you have high school kids making more money than a Heisman Trophy winning quarterback starting in the NFL just blows my absolute mind. This NIL stuff is just completely out of control. And sidebar, hey, Jimbo, what you got to say now?
I didn't know if you're going to go this direction.
Oh, yeah. We didn't buy anybody. We're playing beyond the rules. And now you got a video of a staffer talking about, hey, you see up there in the suites, that's where all the people sit to pay you all the money to come here. Nah, but you didn't buy anybody, right? No, you didn't? I mean, Nick was wrong, right? Okay. All right. Well, anyway, so it's just absolutely freaking ridiculous and it's embarrassing. But I'm going to make this a two-parter because I don't have a whole lot to say on the NIL stuff. I know it's kind of like a moratorium, but I wanted just to get that out there in the atmosphere, just how ridiculous that is. But something that Dan is totally pumped up about is what the freaking Hawks did. How about that? We get DeJounte Murray, which is great. I didn't know a whole lot about him. I mean, obviously, I've looked up on him and followed all that stuff, but they wanted a king's ransom for that guy. They wanted a holiday-like package that they got, and we gave them 3 first-round picks, okay, which if you're winning the way that you're supposed to be winning, all of those picks are going to be in the late 20s or, maybe 30. Who knows? And you're not going to get anybody of significance at that part of the draft in basketball, which goes to my other rant that we had a while back, which was how in the hell do you have not more than 3 players in a freaking draft? The NFL can find superstars in the 7th round, but yet somehow in the NBA draft you can't. But anyway, DeJounte Murray, we get him. We give up the expiring contract of Gallinari, and we get a playmaker that Trey wanted. This is who Trey wanted. This is a guy that he wanted to take the ball out of his hands, take some of that pressure off, get his usage rate down. And this is what he wanted, and we were able to get it done. And we didn't give up a king's ransom. Now, as Woj said last night on Scott Van Pelt's show, the Hawks are probably kicking themselves in the ass a little bit because they jumped the gun on this Murray thing maybe a day too early, because the following day, Kevin Durant comes out and says, I want to trade. Well, the Hawks had a bunch of assets at the time to possibly make that move or to do something with Kevin Durant. But Woj said, don't count the Hawks out. They're trying to get creative. And today, they traded away my favorite player, which is Kevin Huerter, which I've liked him ever since he got here. He's kind of like a Swiss Army knife for us. He does a lot of different things. He can take the ball out of Trey's hands. But now that you got DeJounte Murray, you don't necessarily need him, which sucks for Kevin, sucks for me because I actually like the guy. But we were able to get a first-round pick back for him and some other keys, some other players. And maybe we do have enough left now to go get somebody like Kevin Durant. Now, I know that's a pipe dream, and it's probably not going to happen. But at the end of the day, it's fun to talk about, and it's probably the first time in the last long time that we actually have a legitimate chance at landing some of these stars. I mean, the most realistic thing right now would be us going to get Ayton. He's only 24, 25 years old. He was the number 1 overall pick in the draft. Great rim protector, can shoot a little bit better than Capella. Woj said something last night. He said if there's probably a really the most realistic way for this to happen would be signing trades where Kevin Durant ends up in Phoenix, Ayton ends up here in Atlanta, draft picks get moved around. Somehow Collins and probably Capella end up in Brooklyn, and that's probably the way they see it playing out as a 3-team trade. Who knows? But I'm just so happy that we were able to get a real weapon that can help Trey in the backcourt, and it's going to be a lot of fun. So I'm pissed off about the ridiculousness of the NIL, which, okay, whatever. And super excited about what the Hawks are doing right now, and I'm excited about this season. That's my rant.
Wanted to change it up there a little bit. Dan mentioned earlier in the week that he wanted to do something that he was pumped up about. I think there may have been a word in between pumped up and all that. But this is going to take us in. We got 10 minutes until we hit that hour mark. So we're going to see if we can squeeze this in. I know we went an hour and 26 minutes. I was pretty proud looking at the audience attention rate of how long the audience lasted through that. A lot higher than I expected. But with that, we are going to finish out our fall camp position previews on the offensive side of the ball with the three positions everyone loves talking about. And if you don't like talking about these three positions, then I don't know what's wrong with you. You may just be Kirby Smart. That may be it. You may like talking about defense. But today we're going to be talking about quarterbacks, wide receivers, and tight ends. We thought, we can bunch these up and talk about them all together because I think, they're the three positions we've talked about a lot on this show. So we didn't want to spend too much time on them individually. So we just put them together. But Dan, let's start with quarterbacks. Obviously we didn't touch on it too much. I mean, you touched on it a little bit with, why losing out on Arch Manning doesn't kill Georgia's, it doesn't hurt as bad because you do got a stacked quarterback room. It was Tony Barnhart that put out a tweet the day of saying, Georgia still has a 5-star quarterback. They have 2 4-stars. And you got a national championship winning quarterback. That's one of the best rooms in college football at quarterback when you put it that way because, Stetson Bennett led you to a national championship, made the biggest pass that I've been alive for. Second biggest pass to Buck Blue to Lindsey Scott against Florida. If Georgia lost that game back in 1980, you don't win a championship most likely. So, it was the second biggest pass. But, Bennett threw for over 3,000, almost threw for 3,000 yards. Right there, he was close. Had 29 touchdowns and 7 interceptions. And we still got people out here saying, he's not the best quarterback on Georgia's roster. And from a talent perspective, he may not be. But when you put him together with the pieces Georgia has around him, he's going to win you games. Expectation is to get back to the playoffs. That's what the expectation should be every year. And, more this year than any other year because Georgia has so many offensive weapons. Yes, your defense lost a lot of pieces, but anything less than a college football playoff appearance is a failure, Dan. At least in my book for this year, that's what the expectation should be. I have no doubt that Stetson Bennett can be the starting quarterback on another undefeated regular season team. Because looking at Georgia's schedule outside of Tennessee and Oregon, it's not too daunting.
So, here's my thing. You gave the stats for Stetson: 3,000 yards, 29 touchdowns, and 7 interceptions. But also keep in mind, and I know you said this before, I've said this before, a lot of people have brought it up, but just it's always good just to remind yourself that Stetson didn't play in every game. He wasn't the starter for a while. He was never asked to put up the massive numbers, right? Because a lot of times we're up big early. I mean, I think Arkansas, weren't we up like 21-0? We were up 21-0 like the first 2 or 3 minutes on somebody. I don't even remember who it was.
Maybe in Arkansas.
Yeah, and it was just kind of like coasting from there on out. So Kirby, the one thing about Kirby that's different than some of these other coaches is, Ohio State or, I always go back to Bobby Bowden back in the day when he was at Florida State. And part of that was because they had to beat people so bad to make sure that they got in because they were independent. And then once they got to the ACC and whatever, but Bobby Bowden, if he could put up 80 on you, he would do it. And he would do it every single week. Kirby's never done that. I think the closest we can get to Kirby trying to shove it up somebody's backside was what they did to Vanderbilt last year. And we all took a little bit of pride in that. But even still, it could have been so much worse. And he pulls, he pulls punches sometimes. Kirby does. He doesn't try to just rub it down somebody's throat. So, Bennett's numbers could actually be better than what they actually were. But you have Carson Beck, who, by all accounts, has looked really, really good. He's everything that you would necessarily want. Brock Vandagriff is supposed to be getting better and more comfortable in his offense. prototypical guy. I mean, then everything about him screams that he should be a massive D1 quarterback. And then you've got Gunner, just lurking in the shadows, waiting for somebody to screw up and to get an opportunity. So that quarterback room is absolutely freaking loaded. And I did see somebody tweet out where, um, you know, uh, Stetson coming back for a 6th year has completely put a log jam on the Georgia quarterback room, and it's actually kind of hurt the development and productivity of these younger guys. And while there is some truth to that, if these other guys were so much better, they would just win the job, right? I mean, you have to believe that. I think you do. I think you have to believe that, and I want to believe that's the case. So, and like I said, I'm on record, and I am. I'm like, Stetson's our guy, right? He's our starting quarterback, unless he gets hurt. Then all bets are off. But anyway, so I think we're well versed, well covered. I think everybody else is pretty locked in on the quarterback room. We know what we have. We know where we are. But then let's move on to the wide receivers and tight ends, if you don't mind so much. So the wide receiver room, we lose Pickens and Jermaine Burton from last season. I think losing Pickens is a bigger deal than Jermaine Burton. But, as you mentioned right here in your notes, you're bringing back guys like, A.D. Mitchell, Ladd McConkey, Karis Jackson. I always say don't forget about Rosemy Jack Saint. He's the guy that I'm excited about. And then, Terrence Edwards is on record saying he thinks A.D. Mitchell is going to be just the freaking guy. And Aaron Smith is coming back. And there was somebody else, one of the freshmen coming in.
Dylan Bell is someone who.
Yeah, Dylan Bell. That's who Terrence Edwards thinks is going to be the next superstar at Georgia's Dylan Bell. So you have those guys. And then, when we were talking about this, Harrison, you said, we can't talk about the receivers without talking about the tight ends. And we actually brought up Rudes. I don't know if he's still in the chat, but we talked about how Rudes is like, hey, listen, our tight ends are wide receivers. So we're going to cover them all together. You have so many freaking tight ends that can split out wide. Like, there's just so many guys to talk about that you can't really drill in on one guy without glossing over somebody else. I mean, Brock Bowers, we saw what he could do in the slot. Eric Gilbert, whenever he originally came in, Brooks was talking about that they were going to line him up at the X, on the outside. There's so many options with those guys. I mean, like, we don't really 100% know what Oscar Delp is going to do for the Dogs, but everything we saw in the spring game, he looked pretty good. And then you have Darnell Washington, who, for the life of me, I can't figure out why isn't our number one red zone target. There is just so much talent in those two rooms, and they really kind of piggyback off of each other. While some people say our wide receiver room is not as deep, it doesn't necessarily have to be so deep right now because you have so many weapons in that tight end room that can really supplement. So, yeah, that wide receiver and tight end room is about as loaded as it could possibly get. Like, like, you have some names of Ohio State's guys. I mean, I don't know that there's enough. There's only one football being thrown. I don't know how we're going to satisfy all these hands.
And, speaking of tight ends, just how loaded that room is. Yeah, receiver may not have as much depth or quality depth as you may like. I mean, recruiting star-wise, putting the stars, you're looking at all the stars Georgia has in the receiver room. They have a ton. It's just about whether or not those guys are going to stay healthy. But in, the tight end room, we talk about Oscar Delp. We talk about Eric Gilbert. We talk about Darnell Washington, Brock Bowers. Brock Bowers is probably the most mentioned name in that tight end room. But you also got Rylan Goody and Brett Seether, who are names that got some reps in the spring. Rylan Goody was playing in the spring before he got an injury that sidelined him for the rest of the spring. We're going to see what those guys can do. Brett Seether got a ton of reps this spring thanks to the injuries for the to the people ahead of him. Eric Gilbert looked amazing in that spring game. And if that's anything to go off of, he could be in for a monster season. I think at some point, Dan, I know Kirby Smart has kind of, stepped on the brakes a little bit, put the brakes on the whole hype around him. I think he wants to lower expectations for him. And that's to be expected of a head coach. You don't want to get these guys, as Dan said, you want their heads to be too blown up, and you don't want too much expectations on them. You don't want that pressure, but you just want him to play freely. But you also bring back, a guy in the receiver room like Dominic Blaylock, who missed, a ton of time with the two ACL injuries, just a ton of time after, a really promising freshman season. Was one of the most exciting aspects of Georgia's offense aside from George Pickens at receiver. It was Dominic Blaylock. So we're going to see what he looks like. My expectations for him is he's probably going to, help compete in this, for snaps in the slot with Kyrus Jackson. Kyrus Jackson's another guy that missed time last year. I don't think was ever really fully 100% just because of that offseason knee surgery that lingered. But before that, the season before last, he had a really great connection with Stetson Bennett. He led Georgia in receiving yards, in 2020. I think Pickens either placed second or tied with Jackson at the end of the season when JT Daniels took over. But Jackson was that, that hot route. When Stetson Bennett needed to get out of trouble, he found Kyrus Jackson somehow. So, I'm excited to see what those guys do. The expectation for me is, when Georgia lines up at receiver, it's going to be, Adonai Mitchell out to one side of the field. You got Lab McConkey out to the other side of the field. And then you got Kyrus Jackson or Dominic Blaylock in the slot. Maybe you see Brock Bowers. I think Brock Bowers is definitely going to get some reps in the slot because that's what Georgia's going to do. Maybe we get Eric Gilbert, playing, all over. So, Georgia's offense is loaded. I'm really excited. You got three names above Oscar Delp. He's going to be someone that I don't think gets a ton of reps against the number one defenses, that Georgia plays, for starting defenses. But, Dan, you're going to get time and incubation period where you can really develop Oscar Delp. By the time he's starting, by the time he's that big name in that room, he's going to be a stud.
And I think that's the plan with that guy too, is that, they got him and they don't have to, but we have other guys coming in too. Like it's just, Georgia is so ridiculous right now. It's incredible. Like we've been throwing all these names, but they have other guys coming in like Pierce Spurlin. You have the number one tight end in the country who's wearing Georgia gloves at the Elite 11 competition. And, he's talking about wanting to come here. The one thing, if you look at Georgia's wide receivers, the one thing that they don't have is the little guy, right? The little speedster that lines up in the slot, gets lost in coverage, catches the ball, takes off. Hunter Renfrow is not the biggest guy in the world, is he? I don't think he's that massive. A lot of these like the Danny Amendola type of guys. And, for me personally, one of my friend's kids, Logan Johnson, Lojo, he's tiny and he's a walk-on, and everybody's like, oh, he'll never see the field of Georgia. Well, he's so quick and fast, and he gets in and out of spaces that's Brock's guy. He tore his ACL last year and he's recovering. He's back there. He's running in a pool now. But I was really excited to see if he would get any shot to get on the field in the slot, because he's so different than everything that we have. We have big, giant, thoroughbred racehorses everywhere. And there is a place in football for the little guy. There just is. There always has been. There always will be. But you have to be special. You have to be a special kind of guy. Logan is one of the best route runners I've ever seen, getting in and out of breaks, super twitchy, fast, extremely athletic. And he's like 5'5", 5'6". He's tiny, but he's
Brock Vandergrift's number one option.
Number one option. The guy, he loves him, and he had no problem finding him. So I hope he gets healthy enough, because I think that would be something good for Georgia to have, just because it's so different than everything else. Maybe he never sees the field. Maybe this is just me trying to be overly optimistic. I'm not sure. But, it's just the one thing that stood out to me in the recruiting is if you look at the guys that Georgia brings in, they're bringing in a bunch of Julio Joneses, and they're not bringing in any Amendolas. So, but there's always going to be a place for that. So that's the one thing I think if you're putting Georgia's receivers and tight ends on a list and saying check, the one thing that we don't have is that little tiny guy that can work in the slot. But like you said, Blaylock and Jackson have done a really good job of doing that. But it's just a different type of player. Like what's the little white dude to play for Alabama that gave us so much hell in the championship game?
Bolden.
Was it Bolden? And that guy's like what, 5'10", 5'9", something like that?
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah, but like, we have big giants everywhere, and they had such a hard time getting their hands on them. So all I'm saying is that's just the one thing that seems to be missing, but I don't think we're going to suffer from it.
Absolutely. And I think the one thing that the biggest question I got outside of the tight ends, where's your X factor? We talked about it last week. I think it was last week. I think I may have mentioned it. Arian Smith is the guy that I look to as someone who has a X factor trait, whether it's his, with his speed. Got to see him stay healthy. He's not participating in track this spring, so he's had a full offseason of football. And hopefully he's been fully healthy. And for the most part, he's been healthy. I know he was a no contact in the spring, kind of getting back from his broken leg that he suffered at the end of last year. He has an elite trait. So, I want to see him get involved. If he's healthy, he's going to do damage. Alabama's had great success with having a guy like Arian Smith. Henry Ruggs, I mean, they're a little bit different because Henry Ruggs was a guy that can take a screen to the house, where we haven't really seen that from Arian Smith just yet. But, who's going to cover that guy? The only guy on Georgia's roster that I've seen, just you have pictures of, how fast they've run miles per hour wise with those catapult trackers is Kaylee Ringo. That's the only guy that's put up a speed that was just as fast, if not faster, than Arian Smith. So, that's an elite trait. I want to see him get involved. He's gonna be one of your outside receivers. You can put him in the slot and have him go deep. When you're back in the backyard, back in the day, Dan, if you're the receiver and you're just, you weren't that good, you weren't that athletic, that's how you go long. I don't know how often I never got open, but it can happen. So I'm really excited to see what Georgia has all at receiver. To your point though, when I put that on the show notes because it was an example of what losing George Pickens, there is no immediate replacement. And I think it's kind of getting, that's why Georgia's so underrated at receiver this year. Because when you look at Ohio State, they lost Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave, 2 first-round receivers, 2 really good college receivers. But they also got Jackson Smith and Jigba coming back. Probably the best receiver in college football. I mean, we talked about it. We were in open admiration a few weeks back. That Rose Bowl game was the single greatest performance from a receiver, I think, of all time.
I think Larry Fitzgerald had a couple games like that where he was just like ridiculous. I'm sure there's some other guys too. We're totally going to miss people on that because we didn't look that up. But going back to your point on Arian Smith, we haven't really had a guy that's that electric since McCole Hardman left. I mean, McCole had no problem taking the top off. One of the fastest, most fluid athletes I've ever seen. If you remember in the national championship against Alabama, the one that we lost, unfortunately, he burnt everybody down the sidelines. And I'm talking about, was it from historically underthrew everybody, but he threw that son of a gun as far as he could possibly throw it, and McCole went and got it. And Arian Smith's kind of the same way, and I would kind of hope that they would try to use him in much in the same way that they use Hardman, but I don't know that they're necessarily the same athletes. And forgive me, but I haven't really seen enough of him to really have an opinion. So I'm not really sure who's gonna be that guy. But man, there's just, like I said, there's so much talent in that room. And losing George Pickens, right? George Pickens is special. He really is, and he could do some great things. But at the end of the day, for injuries or suspensions or whatever the case may be, he was never on. He didn't do for us what like AJ Green did for us, right? Like I think he's as talented. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying the guy's not talented, but like AD Mitchell can replace him because he didn't catch for like 1,500 yards and 20 touchdowns. He didn't do that. It was he would make big plays when we needed to. Well, you're trying to tell me that AD couldn't do that? I don't believe that. I mean, he had one of the biggest catches in Georgia history in the national championship game as a freshman. So, I think we do have an immediate replacement for him, and I think his name is AD Mitchell.
I'm speechless because, yes, there is definitely that side of AD. We just got to see it more. That's the big thing is we got to see it more. He made the biggest catch on the biggest stage. Probably, I mean, it was a harder catch than maybe not harder catch than what George Pickens had. But Dan,
you say you got to see more, but then you could say the same thing about Pickens.
Yeah,
you needed to see more. So I mean, it's I get what
this was supposed to be. This was supposed to be Pickens, big year this past season. It was supposed to be the year for him. and sadly the ACL injury sidelined that. It was amazing enough to just see him return and get back on the field to finish his Georgia career the way he wanted to with a national championship. But, Georgia has, like to Dan's credit, has a ton of options. And, they found A.D. Mitchell was a diamond in the rough. And they brought him in. He made the biggest catch and, one of the biggest catches in Georgia history. But, guys, that is going to wrap it up for episode 47 of the Top podcast. That was Dan Kiley. I'm Harrison Reno. Dan, real quick, I'm going to flash up the little banner so I can remember what your Twitter handle is. It is at Dan Kiley 3, if I'm correct. Dan, do you have anything to add before we let the people go this Friday night?
No, man, that was a super packed episode, and I feel like we cut so many corners just to get through it. But that was a lot of information. I hope people enjoyed listening.
Absolutely, guys. You can go find Dan at Dan Kiley 3 on Twitter. Go interact with him. Go shoot him some DMs. Even go like his tweets and retweet him. Let's get him up. Let's get him up to over 500 followers and get him.
I'm pathetic. I am pathetic. I have like nobody following me. Come on, guys.
Let's get him up there, guys. He also is a baseball enthusiast. You were a former minor league umpire, professional umpire.
Mm-hmm.
So he's well versed in a lot of games.
Oh, your robo umpire conversation just got a lot hotter because the MLB came out and said they will be using electronic umpires in 2025. So it is 100% happening now.
We got some more on that, actually, because I think Dan is trying to hook us up with a special edition of the Top podcast coming for episode 50. Dan, yes. If you want to elaborate that just on a tiny bit, go ahead.
So my goal is right now to either bring in well, I'm not going to name names, but I have two different guys. One guy was in the running to be the minor league president of all of minor league baseball. Umpire. He was an umpire. He was the head instructor at Wendelstedt. And then the other is one of my guys. He is the commissioner of two different baseball leagues, and he is an umpire. He's a commissioner of the umpires or whatever. I've got a couple of big names that I'm trying to get in on the show. My only hesitation is that I don't know how much they're going to be willing to talk because they are part of the union and they're not trying to get kicked out of it because that union is really good to be part of.
But guys, stay tuned for that. We'll have more details as we get closer. We are on the road to 50 episodes, and we're also on the road to Georgia football being back. I think we're at 64 days. I'm excited. New season coming up. We're about to get into the meat of the offseason, the final home stretch. Guys, that was Dan Kiley. I'm Harrison Reno. We'll see you back next week. Reminder, next Friday, we'll have more information as we get closer to that date. Got to talk with Dan to see what time works best for everybody. So see you back next week, guys, for episode 48 of the Top Dog Talk podcast.